I think it's both the years and the mileage at this point. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the fifth film in the Indiana Jones franchise, the 2023 action-adventure sequel, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny stars Harrison Ford, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and Mads Mikkelsen, and was directed by James Mangold. Set in 1969, it tells the story of retiring archaeologist Indiana Jones as he joins his goddaughter in one last race against time to recover a powerful artifact. With the crack of a whip, the silhouette of a fedora, and the first few notes of the Raiders March, we instantly know that we're in for an action-packed, sci-fi, fantasy-laden adventure with everybody's favorite archaeologist. For 42 years, Indiana Jones has been delighting filmgoers with his wit, charm, action, and puzzle-solving skills. The original trilogy stood alone for nearly 20 years before Indy's surprising return in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Although that film didn't have a sense of finality to it, it did seem unlikely that we'd ever get a follow-up. And that unlikeliness grew with each passing year. But 42 years after he debuted in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and 15 years after his last appearance, Indy has picked up the hat and whip for one final adventure. As a fan of this franchise, including Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I was very excited by the prospect of a fifth Indiana Jones movie. A little curious as to how it was going to play out with a now 80-year-old Harrison Ford donning the hat, but excited nonetheless. As with any legacy sequel, this movie was not trying to reinvent the wheel. Dial of Destiny is a nostalgia-fueled continuation, harking back to the past we know and love, while letting us see familiar things in a slightly different light. This is absolutely an Indiana Jones movie, full of classic indie things you would expect. It's got that humorous action-adventure tonal blend, another historical relic that needs to be kept out of Nazi hands, and a series of big action set pieces. The opening 25 minutes of the film are an exciting and quite literal throwback to the films of old. Set in 1944, this opening features a fairly impressively de-aged Harrison Ford taking on Nazis at the end of World War II. The de-aged eyes are a little wonky at times, and hearing an 80-year-old's voice coming out of a 45-year-old's mouth took a little getting used to, but that opening sequence was like watching some lost Indiana Jones movie. But even the 1969 portion of the film had that nostalgic Indiana Jones quality to it, pulling elements from each of the four previous films and blending them into the new story. But in spite of all these nostalgic components and instantly recognizable Indiana Jones things, Dial of Destiny feels different. Certainly from the original trilogy, but even from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think there are a couple factors at play here, but one of the most noticeable is the direction. I like James Mangold as a director, and I've enjoyed basically all of his films, so I'm not trying to denigrate him or anything, but he's no Steven Spielberg. And this movie definitely lacks that Spielbergian magic. I realize that probably sounds kind of weird, but I think you also probably know what I mean by it. It's kind of hard to verbalize Spielberg's style, but his movies, especially during the 80s and early 90s, have a very specific look and feel to them. All four of the previous Indiana Jones movies were directed by Spielberg and possess that Spielbergian quality, whatever it is. So even though James Mangold does a fine job with this movie, it's not poorly directed. It doesn't quite feel right because it's lacking that hard to describe but instantly recognizable Spielbergian touch. Another thing that separates Dial of Destiny from its predecessors is Indy himself. Now, obviously, the character is much older in this film, 70, played by an 80-year-old Harrison Ford, but that's not what I'm referring to here. Instead, what's really different here is Indy's mindset and outlook on life. He always had this spark to him, for adventure, for teaching and history, whatever it was, he always approached things with zeal. But the Indiana Jones we're reintroduced to at the start of the 1969 portion of this film isn't that person anymore. Time has really had an impact on him. He's a little curmudgeonly. He seems as disinterested in teaching as his students are in learning. He's lost that spark. Over the course of the film, we come to understand why that is, and the events of the story kind of bring him back to the Indy of old, but it's definitely a different approach to the character. The movie's still a fun adventure, but at its core, it has this kind of downbeat, melancholic through line and an unexpectedly poignant character arc for Indy. Indy's arc is a highlight here, especially for those with an existing emotional investment in the character, but the rest of the story is kind of a mixed bag. It's an odd-numbered Indiana Jones film, so of course, that means the Nazis are back again. Aspects of the plot are very similar to Raiders, with the race against time back and forth with the relic in question, this time the Antikythera, or Archimedes' dial. Mads Mikkelsen is fine as the villain, playing his typical reserved villainous character, in sharp contrast to the often campy, over-the-top villains of past Indiana Jones films. There are a ton of characters involved in this movie, but the only other one of note is Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Helena Shaw, Indy's goddaughter. Because we're along for this ride with Indy, Helena is a bit challenging at first, because she butts heads with him a lot, which makes her a little unlikable to us. But hers is another character arc that's pretty satisfying, and she ends up being a fairly good character and an interesting foil to Indy. Unfortunately, the pacing is all over the place, and this film has a lot of strange loose ends. The main overarching story concludes without leaving too much dangling, but throughout the movie, there are quite a few characters and plot threads that are introduced with very little reason or payoff. Perhaps the most blatant and perplexing instance of this is the character of Mason. She's introduced sort of mysteriously, but once we're told who she is, it's not really clear why she's working with the people she's working with. I think it's supposed to be an allusion to or tie-in with Operation Paperclip, but that character and that whole plotline could be taken out of the movie without affecting a single other aspect of the story. There are quite a few instances of that, which is unfortunate, and likely a consequence of having a few too many writers contributing to the script. However, the actual main plot of the story was enjoyable. Judging by the general negative response to certain plot aspects of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I have a feeling that most people aren't going to be fully on board with the direction the story goes during its third act. I'm not going to spoil anything about it, but I enjoyed it. It felt in line with the typical sci-fi fantasy underpinnings of the franchise, and seeing Indiana Jones, a man who's dedicated his entire life to the preservation and teaching of history, in the situation he finds himself in, definitely brought a smile to my face. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is Indy himself. Just like with the previous Return, I think Harrison Ford does a great job as this character. Obviously, at 80 years old, he's not able to physically do what he used to do, but Indy was always more than just the action anyway. He's still got his trademark everything here, but this film adds a new layer to the story, and we see how time and events of the past have taken their toll on Indy's mindset and outlook on life. He's never been a one-man show, and he's often at his most interesting when paired up with someone. Marion in Raiders, Short Round in Temple of Doom, Henry Jones Sr. in Last Crusade, Mutt Williams in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and now his goddaughter, Helena, in Dial of Destiny. They've got a unique dynamic, and she's equal parts foil and partner, bringing out even more of the characteristics of Indy we've always known and loved. The second pro is the poignancy. Even though I knew this was gonna be the last Harrison Ford-led Indy movie, I wasn't expecting the core of the story and the character arc to be so downbeat. It may have been unexpected, but I thought it brought an impactful and emotional layer to the story. Dial of Destiny is all about time, and the passage of time has hit Indy hard. Not so much in a physical aging way, but more from an emotional and mental standpoint. Dial of Destiny shows us Indy at a point in his life we've never seen before. He starts off as kind of a sad old man who's clearly lost the spark he used to have. Now I get it, that's not the heroic, energetic Indiana Jones we're used to, so I'm sure a lot of people won't be happy to see one of their favorite characters brought down a peg like that. But what makes it worthwhile is the character arc we see, not just in this solitary movie, but across the 5-film franchise. On the con side, the biggest issue is the lack of Spielberg's direction. I really like James Mangold, and I think he does a fine job here, but the movie's missing that something that all 4 of the previous films had. It's hard to verbalize and really nail down exactly what Spielberg brings to his films, but there's a certain quality to them. That Spielbergian look and feel, that nostalgic warmth and practical adventure mixed with humor and deceptively family-friendly overtones, even if the movie isn't really all that family-friendly. Like I said, it's really hard to describe, but I think anybody who's watched Spielberg's movies, especially from the 80s and 90s, knows what I'm talking about. And it's remarkable how much its absence stands out in this movie. The second con has got to be the loose ends in the story. Call them loose ends, call them plot holes, call them random unexplained story threads, call them whatever you want, but there were quite a few of them throughout this movie. The main plot was fine to me. A little repetitive at times, but fine. I even enjoyed the third act. My issue here comes into play with characterizations and story threads and even whole characters whose existence in the story didn't make much sense. Some of these things you can kind of just roll with as part of a fantasy adventure movie, but other things stuck out to me, even in the moment watching the movie. The character of Mason was just a bizarre one to me. I thought she was sort of cool and interesting, but her presence in the story doesn't really have much of a logical explanation, nor does it have any real effect on the story trajectory. There are other minor characters who suffer that same significance fate, and even aspects of Helena or Basil's characterizations don't really make a whole lot of sense, apart from functioning as catalysts and plot devices. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny 3.5 out of 5 paws. It's not the most exciting Indiana Jones adventure, but it's still got enough of what makes this franchise great to keep it enjoyable. The story issues and lack of that Spielbergian touch are noticeable, but the poignancy of Indy's arc makes this an emotional and satisfying final adventure. I would recommend Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to existing fans of the Indiana Jones franchise. It's a film that'll provide moments of entertainment to newcomers, but it's the blend of nostalgia and character investment that makes this one really work. It harks back to all of the previous films, but also takes an emotional look at Indy himself, one that's only fully impactful with 4 movies worth of backstory, history, and emotional investment. If you liked Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I would recommend Raiders of the Lost Ark. As the first movie in the Indiana Jones franchise, it's obviously a good starting point for understanding the character and tone, but the basic plot is also quite similar, featuring Indy and a female partner racing to keep a world-changing relic out of the hands of the Nazis. If you'd like another action-adventure film, but would prefer a slightly younger protagonist, you might want to check out Uncharted. Based on the popular video game franchise, it's an action and puzzle-solving packed treasure-hunting adventure featuring duplicitous main characters. And if you like the idea of an older Indiana Jones and don't mind embracing the sci-fi tendencies of the franchise, you should watch, or rewatch, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Chances are good, if you were on board with the third act of Dial of Destiny, you're probably someone who is more apt to be on board with the third act of its predecessor, too. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite 5-film franchise? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.